Thank you very much for that introduction. I'm delighted to be here in your wonderful country. Thanks to the British Council in Northern Ireland and the Northern Ireland Science Festival, I'm here to talk to you today about horror movies. And I guess if you're here, then like me, you like horror movies. And so that begs the question, what is wrong with you? What is wrong with me? Why would you want to be scared? Why would you put yourself through that? But if you do like horror movies, then you are not alone. You're not alone. Because horror films have been around since the dawn of cinema, and some of the earliest films ever made were horror films. And over 100 years later, they are as popular as ever. So it seems that as humans, we really like watching horror films and stimulating feelings that scare us. And what I want to talk to you today about is why we like that and how horror films do it for us. And really what we're trying to do here is get cheap thrills from horror films. In other words, we like the feelings of these chemicals, these stress chemicals that are released when we feel danger, things like adrenaline and cortisol and dopamine. And we like the feelings that we get when these flood through our bodies. And effectively, this is stimulating the fight or flight reflex that we have established as a species, as a defense mechanism in response to danger. And what we want from horror films is to experience all those feelings of danger, but in a safe position. So it's the same reason we go on roller coasters, the same reason we go bungee jumping, the same reason we do anything that seeks sensation. We want to feel unsafe safely, okay? And really, that's what we want, but horror films, as you know, can be good or bad, and some of them are scary and some of them aren't. So the good ones will really trigger those reflexes and responses effectively, and that's what I want to show you today with a couple of examples of how they do that. So first thing is, they will often feature something that we are scared of. And everybody's scared of different things, and I'll cover a few different things throughout this presentation, but one thing that we are innately scared of as a species is monsters. And these can range from monsters that are scary or creepy or disgusting or monumentally crap. And that's no surprise that we have monsters in horror films, because as a species we are very afraid of things that can eat us, because we might now be the predominant species on the planet, but it's not that long since we lived in very real danger of predation from larger, fiercer animals. And so we have an inbuilt mechanism where we can sense innate danger in our surroundings. And this has been shown in studies with children as young as 3, where eye tracking studies have shown that they are much quicker to spot a picture of an animal poised to strike amongst other pictures of inanimate objects. So we have that inbuilt mechanism where we spot creatures in our surroundings that can harm us. And so when you watch a horror film and the monster lurches into view and you jump and you shriek, that's not just your natural reaction to the film, that is an inbuilt mechanism where you are alerting other members of your species that there is danger nearby. And you can see that when you watch nature documentaries, meerkats and things like that. As soon as they sense a predator nearby, they squeak and everything scatters. And that's really what we're doing as a species when we watch a horror film. It's involuntary. Even though our rational mind is telling us this is just a film, our unconscious mind, our inbuilt mechanisms take over. And that's what a good horror film will do. Linked to fear of monsters is a fear of being bitten. Because remember, although now we have modern medicine to save us if we get bitten, but it's not that long since being bitten was very, very serious indeed. You could die from the infection. And it's no surprise that our favorite movie monsters, the vampire, the werewolf, the zombie, they all spread their infection by biting their victims. We have an inbuilt repulsion at the act of biting. And you can see that outside of horror films. You may remember the footballer, Luis Suarez, who bit another player during a football game. He hadn't broken his leg or damaged his career. He'd just bitten him. Everybody went mad. How dare he? How horrible is this guy that he would bite somebody else? And that instant repulsion is linked to our fear of infection that we have built up as a species through our evolutionary history. And so we've led that, this leads to some of classics in the horror genre. We have, for example, Zombievers. which for my money is the greatest of all the zombie beaver movies, I would say. We also have the killer rabbit movie from the 70s, Night of the Lepus, in which you get some really good special effects. I encourage you to look it out. And we're not even safe in the garden because we have killer slugs who can also kill and bite us. So these are all things, of course, that we are scared of. What we see is important in horror films. And one of the things that horror films feature a lot of is blood and gore. And again, this is linked to our evolutionary biology because we have, as a species, an intrinsic visceral reaction to the sight of blood. So some of you here may even feel faint at the sight of blood. Some people can't look at their arm when they're getting an injection taken. And that's because we've evolved to recognize the sight of blood as something potentially dangerous. Because blood is an internal fluid and normally we shouldn't see it. So if we do see it, it could mean that somebody is wounded or bleeding to death, or that there is danger nearby which has caused the bleeding. And so we have a very visceral reaction to the sight of blood. And in fact, one study in Holland showed that people watching a horror film, levels of coagulation factor in their blood started to rise. So even though they were watching something fictional, their bodies were telling their body to prepare for the loss of blood. In other words, to coagulate blood in case they got wounded. So it's again an unconscious reaction. And on the next slide, I'm going to show you a clip from a film called Alien, which many of you may have seen. And you may have seen this scene before, but you watch it now with new eyes because the director, Ridley Scott, didn't want his characters to act shocked. He wanted them to be shocked. So he didn't tell them, with the exception of John Hurt, the character who it happens to, he didn't tell them what was going to happen. So when you watch the reactions of the actors, they did not know they were going to see blood. So their reactions are real reactions. And one of the actors, called Veronica Cartwright, actually gets hit in the face with some of the blood from the special effects. And there's an edit immediately after that, because on that day, on that set, she almost fainted from the shock. And if you see her in the rest of the scene, she looks really unwell. So let's take a look. It's only a couple of minutes long. Okay.
No, man. I don't want to talk about what it's made of. I'm eating this. What's the matter? The food ain't that bad, baby.
You too? What's wrong?
What's wrong?
What?
Hey,
what's the matter?
no.
Don't
touch it! Don't touch it!
So that's how you get good reactions from people. Do it for real and they will be shocked. And all of the actors have spoken about that film in their biographies and interviews about how much they were shocked that day on film. It's because of that instant revulsion at the sight of blood that we all feel to some extent or another. However, what we don't see in horror films can also be very effective. So the horror genre is filled with masked killers and dolls and face-painted clowns. And there's a reason for this as well. And as you watch that, I'll illustrate this myself. You're laughing, but that's nervous laughter, I know. Now, we have a problem as humans when we do not see other people's faces, because we learn at a very early age, and anyone with babies will know this, how intently they look at your face. We learn at a very early age to read visual cues in a person's face to signal intent. It's a form of communication. Not all communication is verbal. And so when we watch a horror film where the killer's face is masked, we can't see their emotions, we don't know what they want to do, and it starts to really play with our brains. We do not like it when we can't see somebody's face, okay? And that leads us into the territory called the uncanny valley. And this was a theory put forward by a professor of robotics called Professor Mori in Japan, and he built upon some ideas that Sigmund Freud had put forward. And the idea is that the more human-like a robot looks, the more negative our emotional response will be to it. And that dip in the graph is called the uncanny valley. And into that uncanny valley fall things that we have in everyday life. A lot of people don't like mannequins in stores. Donald Trump would be something that would fall into there. It looks human, but we know there's something not quite right. Sex dolls, so I'm told, are like this, you know. And the uncanny valley is where all these human-esque creatures in horror films fall into, and we don't like them because they look human, but there's something just a little bit off about them. Okay? I'm going to take this off now because I can't see anything. What we hear is important. So we don't just have eyes, we have ears, and you will know, of course, that sound is very important in horror films, but it's much cleverer than just a loud noise to make you jump. Studies have shown that humans do not like sounds at the range of their level of hearing. We don't like sounds that are played on instruments beyond their natural range. And so I'm going to show you a clip in a moment of Psycho, because some of the music that appears in films approximates sounds in nature that we don't like. It's called non-linear sound. And a study in America showed that the more that music in a film approximates that sound in nature, sounds like distressed animals or a baby's cry or something like that, the more we get distressed by it. Lots of examples from films like Jaws, like Suspiria, like The Shining, but Psycho is the classic. So we'll play it here. Now, that scene is still quite shocking today, but it's kind of regular now to point out that at no point do you ever see the knife enter the body of Marion Crane. It is all implied by the stabbing noises of on the soundtrack. So much so that people still use that as some sort of shorthand for some sort of psychopath, you know? People who've never even seen the film do that, okay? And you can hear the noise of the violins is screeching. It's right at the edge of the violin's natural range. And then at the end, the low notes coming in as well, at the range of our human hearing. So we don't like that. It goes up and down. It's discordant, and our brains don't like it because we like patterns in music as well as anything else. So what we don't hear can be also important, because it's also been shown that low frequency noise at very low levels can disturb us, because the frequency of the sound waves resonates in our eyeballs and in our eardrums, and it makes us feel unwell, nauseous. And they actually found this in a building in an industrial complex, which was a lot of people were off sick from work, and it turned out that there was industrial machinery working all the time in the building, in the bottom of the building, in the basement, and it was affecting people's health. And it's been shown in a number of studies since that can happen. And so a number of films have used this infrasound at the range of human hearing, right at the bottom, to make their viewers feel uneasy. And films like Paranormal Activity and Irreversible did it so effectively that people had to leave the cinema because they felt so ill watching it. Okay? So there's also the hypothetical brown note, which is a low frequency note that if you play it at just the right pitch, it will cause the listener to lose control of their bowels involuntarily. Now, can you imagine watching a film like that? What did you think of the film? You can see what I mean. And nobody has ever tested that on a human audience until now. Since this talk started, the brown note has been playing through the auditorium, and it should be taking effect about now. So I hope you brought your toilet roll. Some people are going, is he too? It's okay. I'm not allowed to do that for ethical reasons or something like that. It wouldn't have stopped Dr. Frankenstein, I don't think. However, to come back to what we're scared of, how much you're affected by a film partly depends on how much you bring to it, and that includes horror films. So how much you are scared by a horror film will depend on your own beliefs, your surroundings, and your experiences. In other words, your cognitive empathy. How much do you believe in what's happening on screen? You may remember about 20 years ago there was a film called The Blair Witch Project, and when it was first screened in a festival, people said it was the scariest film they had ever seen because it was presented as a real documentary footage. In other words, footage that had been found from people who had been killed by the Blair Witch. Soon after, it became known that it was a very clever hoax, and people started to say, well, I didn't see why that was so funny or so scary. I didn't see what the fuss was about. Because the suspension of disbelief had been ruined because people knew it wasn't real. But if you apply that same principle to other films, people are scared of different things. So for example, a lot of people believe in the afterlife. A lot of people are religious. So we have ghost stories and we have religious horror, and people get very affected by those stories. We have parental fears. I mean, anyone who's got children will know that fear of trying to protect your child, and that's on one side. But then we also have fears where we are worried about our children being demon children. And I mean, anyone with parents, any parent here will know that children are fundamentally psychotic. And it means that when we have children, people say, well, the loveliest, most beautiful sound in the world is the sound of a baby laughing. And I say, well, if it's 3 o'clock in the morning and you're in bed and you hear a baby laughing and you don't have a baby, that's not beautiful. That's not beautiful at all, okay? So you have these demon children film that pop up again and again. People are scared of the dark. And at night, in the dark, most people are in bed. And that's when your mind starts to play tricks on you. That's when you start to think and worry and have nightmares. And so a lot of horror films will feature scenes in the dark, at night, in bed. I'm going to show you one now, which I don't think you'll have seen before. It's a short film, only 2 minutes long, called Lights Out, and it won a horror film competition. It went on to be made into a feature-length film by the same name, but I like the short version better. Okay. That's it. Anyone scared? Anyone feel their heart a little racing there? Yeah. So everything in there is included, you know, the musical stings, the little low electrical buzzing noise, the night, the light, the bed, and then of course at the end the unhappy valley. It's like human, but it's not. Okay, a really effective little horror film. Not surprised at one. And here's the thing: if you feel scared and you have that little nervous release of laughter at the end, that's good, because horror films have been shown to be good for you by 2 or 3 studies, a few more. I mean, these things are few and far between. It's almost as if they have better things to spend money on than seeing if science is good for you. But it has been shown to boost your immune system. It has been shown to help burn calories and even improve mental health, at least in people who like, you know, watching horror films. But best of all, several studies have shown that they make excellent date movies. So we heard earlier on about the science of attraction, and if you are attracted to someone, then you should bring them to watch a horror film with you, because science has shown that one of the natural responses that humans have to danger is to huddle together for safety and for comfort. So if you want to bring somebody on a date and you want to hold their hand, then bring them to see a horror film. Just make sure you know whose hand you are holding. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed it.